Welcome to my channel. My name is Meiko. I'm so sorry it's been a while since I posted a previous video. Actually, I filmed this part separately from the main part. This is because I recorded the later part about months ago, but while I was editing it, my PC broke down. I was busy, so I kept putting off sending it in for repair. In the meantime, I finally sent it in for repair and had the part replaced, and the PC is working again. But the repair shop also told me that I might have the same problem again. So if any videos don't come out for more than a few months again, please assume that my PC is broken again. That's all for now. The reason why it's been quite a while since I posted the previous video. I hope you enjoyed the rest of the video. Now, let me get to the topic of this video. In today's video, I will talk about volume 4 of the manga FULLMETAL Alchemist. Please prepare your copy of the manga if you have one, if possible. Let me start with the titles for each chapter. 第13話、鋼の体。As explained in my very first video, 鋼 means steel, but considering that the title of the manga is not directly translated with steel, I think it is possible that fullmetal is used here as well. The word 体 means body in English. What caught my attention is that it is written in hiragana. Usually, 体 is written like this or in these kanji. The one written in two kanji is usually read as shintai, which also means body in almost the same way. I thought the difference between the two writing styles was just that the one with two kanji is a little cooler. But when I looked into it, I found that the one with two kanji has a stronger sense of the human body. When I think about it, we don't often use the right kanji to write about an animal's body. And actually, this is a little bit about the content of the manga, but in chapter 13, when Slicer, the older brother, is killed by lust, the younger brother shouts, "We can still fight. Give us a body. Give us a new body." Where body 体 is written with the right kanji. He is referring to armor, not strictly speaking a human body, but I think Arakawa sensei may have used this kanji because it is something that is driven by the human soul in the story here. However, the chapter title is written in hiragana. It is not that writing in hiragana is weird. In Japanese, words that can be written in kanji are often written in kanji, but sometimes they are written in hiragana or katakana to balance the text. Personally, I was just a little curious about the fact that the word 体 is written in hiragana in chapter title, while it is written in kanji in the story. This is just my own guess, but I thought maybe the hiragana was used to match the number of letters with the title of chapter 15. When thinking about writing 体 in kanji, Arakawa sensei may have wanted to use the one with two kanji to emphasize that it is a human body. But then the word 心, which means heart in the title of chapter 15, would be a single kanji. So maybe Arakawa sensei decided to make them the same three letters by writing them both in hiragana. Next, 第14話、一人っ子の気持ち。The word 一人っ子 is an only child in English and 気持ち is feelings. So the literal translation would be an only child's feelings. Next, 第15話、鋼の心。This is a bit of a counterpart to chapter 13. Hagane is against steel, but it can be translated as full metal. Kokoro means heart. Kokoro can be written in this kanji, but here it is written in hiragana. I think the intention of Arakawa sensei is to make them more contrasting by arranging the number of letters. Next, 第16話、それぞれの行く先。The word それぞれの is sometimes translated with the word each. The word destination was given by the translator for 行く先, but it may be wrong, but I feel that destination has the meaning of goal at the same time. It is true that the Japanese word yokusaki has the meaning of goal, but it also has the meaning of the place one is going to, where it has not yet been clearly defined. So I thought that using destination would give a slightly different impression. Maybe instead, way or path could be used to translate yukusaki. Like volume 3, which I explained in the previous video, this volume 4 also has an extra chapter, so I will also check its title. 外伝、軍の犬? It is actually a phrase that I have picked up several times. The word gun is military in English and inu is dog in English. I explained in a past video that there are several kanji for the Japanese word inu, meaning dog, but inu used here is the most common kanji. To add a little more about reading, Japanese often raises the end of a word when it is used in question form. To demonstrate, first, when there is no question mark, it is pronounced like this, 軍の犬. On the other hand, when a question mark is added, it is pronounced like this, 軍の犬? Could you tell the difference between the two? 軍の犬. 軍の犬? Anyway, that's all about chapter titles. Now, let me explain what I found interesting in the manga itself. Let's start with chapter 13. The first scene I will explain is where Al is imagining what Ed was about to say because Barry asked him about his own identity. One thing he came up with was, your personality and your memories are artificially created. In Japanese, it is お前のその人格も記憶も人工的に作り上げたものなんだ. Written in a mixture of kanji and katakana. In my past video, I mentioned that the relationship between hiragana and katakana is like the relationship between lowercase and uppercase letters in the alphabet. My personal feeling is that kanji and hiragana make up more than 90% of a Japanese sentence, so katakana is not usually used that often. In fact, this sentence would normally be written using only hiragana and kanji like this, but here the hiragana are replaced by katakana. It may be difficult for non-Japanese to understand, but there are several effects of writing in katakana that are normally written in hiragana or kanji. First, because katakana is not used a lot in a sentence, it stands out more, so it can have the effect of emphasizing the word or making the reader feel that something is off because it is eye-catching. Also, while hiragana has a relatively rounded shape and soft feel, katakana is a bit crunchy in comparison, and perhaps that is why it can seem a bit more emotionless. In manga, dialogue for robots or AI is sometimes written in katakana. There are many other effects depending on the context, but I'll leave it at that for this video. Let's look again at the original sentence with a lot of katakana and the sentence with the katakana part written in hiragana. Here is the one using katakana, and here is the one using hiragana. The parts that remain the same in both are the kanji. Again, katakana and then hiragana. What do you think? Do you get a different impression? Personally, I thought that since it was Al's imaginary Ed's dialogue and not Ed himself, it might be written in katakana to make it a little unusual. I am curious to know how it is expressed in other languages. In English, I think sometimes uppercase is used for emphasis, but I'm not sure if it's used in other situations. The next scene I want to explain is a little further down the page, where Ed is taken to the hospital and gets slapped and lectured by Maria Ross. Before she slapped him, she said, "I apologize first for my rudeness," and apologized to Ed as soon as she finished her speech. And she seemed worried about being blamed for the slap along with Brush. All of this is because Ed is a state alchemist and has the equivalent of a major in the military, which is a higher rank than Ross and Brush. But Ed says not to worry about it and that there is no need to use honorifics. In Japanese, as soon as he says that, the two of them start talking to him in a casual way, and I wonder how this is expressed in other languages. Of course, I am sure there are polite expressions in other languages, but I am not sure if the difference between casual and honorific speech is as obvious in other languages as it is in Japanese. To explain a little about the most obvious form of Japanese honorifics, there is one called desumasu-jo. The desumasu-jo means to end a sentence with des or masu. For example, 漫画が好きです。毎日読みます. This sentence is an honorific that means I like manga. I read them every day. If you want to say this in a casual way, for example, 漫画が好きだよ。毎日読むよ. In the past tense, it is sometimes changed to でした or ました. But basically, when you hear です or ます, you can assume that people are speaking in an honorific way. In Japanese, the endings of honorifics and casual speech are completely different, so it is easy to tell when people have switched to the other. What about other languages? Please let me know in the comments. Moving on to the next. Ed calls Winley and Brush asks, "Are you calling for your girlfriend?" Then Ed gets upset and opens his wound. It is almost like a comedy scene. Here where Ed fell, there is a small handwritten sentence in the Japanese version, but I wonder if such detailed handwriting is translated in other languages. Anyway, in the Japanese version, there is a sentence that means, on the other side of a big river, my mother waves her hand. This usually rings a bell for Japanese people, because there is a river called Sanzu-no-kawa, which is said to flow at the border between the present world and the afterworld. Therefore, seeing the mother on the other side of the big river means that he is on the border between the present world and the afterworld. In other words, he is dying. This concept of a river separating this world from the next seems to exist not only in Japan but also in many other countries. However, The extent to which this concept has spread among people differs from country to country, and there may be countries where there is no legend of such a river. In Japan, I think it is quite widely known. It is not so much that people strongly believe in its existence or that everyone knows the details of its origin, but we know that there is a legend of something called Sanzu no Kawa. So in Japanese manga and anime, there is often a little joke where a damaged character will say, "I can see someone on the other side of the river." Speaking of which, the Sanzu no Kawa reminded me of something that happened to my grandfather, who passed away from an illness many years ago. About 10 years before he passed away, he had a life-threatening illness that caused him to temporarily lose consciousness. He had an operation, and when he regained consciousness, he told us an interesting story. My grandfather said he was at the river. Then he saw a fish jump in the river, and since he was a big fisherman, he thought, "I have to go home to get my fishing rod." So he started walking with his back to the river, and then he woke up. He must have been dreaming. I remember my grandfather laughing and saying, "If the fish hadn't jumped at that moment, I would have crossed the river and died." I wonder if people dream such dreams during near death because they know the legend that there is a river on the border between this world and the next, or if the legend came about because many people who experienced near death dreamed such dreams. The last part was a bit off topic, but that is all for chapter 13. Let me start my explanations of chapter 14 here. The first thing I will explain is the little joke, but since I believe it is a joke that only works in Japanese, I am curious to know how it is done in other languages. When Winley arrived at Central, she found Major Armstrong at the train station and talked to him. To Winley, who complains that Edith doesn't even come to pick her up, the Major tells her that Ed is actually in hospital, and Winley gets surprised, but after a moment she says, "He finally committed a crime and is in a juvenile training school." At least in the Japanese version, it is like that. But because it is a joke made in Japanese, it is possible that this part might be translated in a completely different way. To talk a little more about it, there is a word, "nyuin," in Japanese that is written in these kanji. The first kanji, "nyu," means to enter. The next kanji, "in," means building or facility, so it is used to describe various types of facilities. For example, 病院, it means hospital, and 病院, which may sound a little like 病院 in the previous example, but its meaning is completely different. 病院 is hair salon, and 少年, which means juvenile training school. There are many more, but only 病院 and 少年 are relevant to the conversation between Winley and Major Armstrong here, so let me read the others aside. In short, the joke is that since 入院 means to enter a facility that includes the kanji in for its name, Winley took it to mean 少年院, juvenile training school, which is actually 病院, a hospital that Ed entered. But usually the word 入院 is used to mean to be hospitalized, so it is kind of pushy joke even in Japanese. And I guess this joke is only possible in Japanese and maybe a few languages that use kanji. I wonder how it is translated in other countries. When I think about it, it is difficult to translate jokes. So it may be that the joke has been changed to something else that fits the situation. The next thing I want to talk about is where Hughes has just finished a call with Colonel Mustang and is being slightly complained about by a woman who works at the telephone place. The panel where she complains, "Please don't use the military line for private conversations." There is a bit of handwriting, just as there was in chapter 13. In Japanese, it says 91320 to, which basically is recording the time that Hughes was using the phone. I wonder if it is written in other languages as well. The 1320 means 1 for 1, 3 for 3, 2 for 2, and 0 for maru. That is 1320. I mean 1:20 p.m. If you look closely, the time indicated by the clock drawn on the panel is roughly that time. I think many countries besides Japan also use the 24 o'clock system in the military, transportation, etc. But in Japan, we use it quite often in our daily lives. We do have words like gozen and gogo that correspond to AM and PM. And we use analog clocks that are based on the 24 o'clock system, but digital clocks are more often displayed in the 24 o'clock system. We use it even after 24 o'clock. This often happens with late night anime. For example, if you check the broadcast date and time on something like the official website, you will find that it says from 25 o'clock on Sunday. Strictly speaking, it should be from 1 a.m. on Monday, but it may be easier for some Japanese people to understand when it is said from 25 o'clock on Sunday. I got off topic. Going back to 1320. This is more like saying 1320 than 1320. In Japanese, when we read a clock, we do not say the numbers one by one like this, but this form of telling time was used in the military, for example. In everyday life, 1320 is said like 13時20分 using the numbers 13 and 20. Moving on to next. When Winley visits Ed in his hospital room and finds out how badly he is hurt, she gets depressed that Ed's injury could be due to her lack of maintenance on the old mill. But after Ed tells her that it is not Winley's fault, she quickly moves on and starts talking about the cost of maintenance charges. At the moment, what Winley is holding is, unless the illustration has been changed from the Japanese version. By the way, is it possible for the manga illustration to be changed from the original? I have no idea. Anyway, the item Winley is holding here is a soroban. The soroban is a traditional Japanese tool used to help with calculations. It is used to calculate by moving the beads. Nowadays, calculators have taken the place of the soroban, but before calculators became popular, the soroban was essential for such occasions as business discussions. In Japan today, the soroban is not used in everyday life, but it is used for educational purposes. I only had a little experience with the soroban in elementary school, and I don't even remember how to move the beads, but one of my friends who took soroban lessons said that she could do 3-digit additions without using a calculator. She said that by moving the soroban in her head, she could do the calculations quickly. She said that a person who has mastered the soroban can do more complicated calculations. It is probably just an icon that Winley is holding a soroban here, since the Japanese share the image of the soroban being something when it comes to business meetings, rather than setting up the world building of Amestris as a country where soroban is used. Of course, it would be interesting to take it that way. The last thing I will explain about chapter 14 is the following scene after Winley is invited to the Hughes' house. During the conversation with Hughes, she talks about how Ed and Al are like her siblings. The Japanese equivalent of siblings is the word kyōdai. As those who have studied Japanese may know, we usually learn these kanji for kyōdai. However, here it is written in hiragana instead of the kanji. The reason is that the commonly used kanji for kyōdai is written by using the kanji for ani, older brother, and ototo, younger brother. Therefore, when it is used to describe siblings of both the boy and the girl, it is sometimes written in hiragana. Or the kanji for ane, older sister, and the kanji for ototo, younger brother, or the kanji for ani, older brother, and the kanji for imoto, younger sister are written side by side and both are read as kyōdai. Sorry, my bad. For some reason, I skipped a sentence in the script. I just wanted to say that when the kanji for older sister and younger sister are written side by side, it usually reads shimai. That was an addition. But when Hugh says you two look like sisters looking at Alicia clinging to Windy, the sisters part in Japanese is written with the kanji ane, older sister, and imoto, younger sister, but was read as kyōdai. I think this is to emphasize the theme of siblings in the story in this chapter by having it read as kyōdai instead of shimai as usual. So siblings might be better than sisters in English too. Of course, in the Japanese version, kanji is shimai, so sisters is not wrong. But considering the intention to make it read kyōdai, siblings may be closer. The Japanese word kyōdai can be used to mean both the English words brothers and siblings, while the word shimai can only be used to mean sisters. And there is no independent word in Japanese that has only the meaning of siblings. That's all for chapter 14. I will then move on to explaining chapter 15. The first thing I want to explain is about halfway through the chapter, when fewer Bradley comes to visit Ed with a melon. I think the standard sympathy gift varies from country to country, so I want to talk about Japanese things. In Japan, fruit used to be the standard. Fruits are rich in vitamins and other nutrition, so people used to bring them to hospital to visit patients to cheer them up. And since melons are one of the luxury fruits in Japan, they have a strong image as a gift. But this is changing a bit, and I think nowadays it is more common for things like sweets. This is because some fruits require quite a bit of time and effort to peel, and some do not last very long. So recently, sweets are preferred because they are easy to eat and last a long time. When the FULLMETAL Alchemist series was running, fruit may have been still this mainstream as a sympathy gift. Even if that is not the case, just like the Soroban case I mentioned earlier in chapter 14, there is still an image of fruit when it comes to sympathy gifts, so I think Arakawa sensei chose melon for easy understanding. The next scene I will cover is a little further down the page, where Hughes realizes something and escapes while being attacked by lust, and makes a phone call from an outside phone booth instead of inside the military. Because the call is from an outside line, Hughes is asked for a code. There is a little joke in that code, so I will talk about that. First, let me pronounce that code like Japanese. It's uncle, sugar, Oliver, 8, 0, and 0. They are all English words, but the first uncle is a bit confusing because it can be either uncle or ankle in English. Japanese does not have as many sounds as English, so both ankle and ankle ends up as uncle in katakana when written in Japanese. In fact, I can't even pronounce them well, and it's probably hard for me to distinguish between the two. So you can use either uncle or ankle for the code uncle here, but I would stick with uncle in this case, because if so, it will make up a little joke that only people who knows Japanese can understand. The first letter of all codes except uncle is this. When U is added at the beginning, it becomes the Japanese word uso 800. The word uso means lie and 800 means 800. 800 is not a specific number, but rather the number 8 is often used to express a large number in Japanese. In other words, uso 800 means a pack of lies, total bullshit. When I read the manga, I had no idea that the first letters of the code could be connected to form the word uso 800. But then, I think it was last year, I was reading FULLMETAL Alchemist on the official application, and in that application you can write comments for each chapter. And when I looked at the comments for the chapter, I saw someone pointing out the uso 800 thing. After I realized that, it is hard to believe that the codes uncle, sugar, Oliver, 8, 0, and 0 were randomly chosen. I think they are intentionally put in as a joke to say this code is a fake. So I hope the English version uses uncle. By the way, speaking of other versions besides English, is the code still kept in English, or is it translated into the other languages? If you know, please let me know. There are two more things I want to talk about from the same scene. After Hughes says the code, he is told to wait a moment, but he can't stop himself from yelling. Hurry up! Gun ga yabe! The word gun in gun ga yabe means military, and the word yabe is a broken form of the word yabai, and I will explain the meaning of yabai later. The Japanese phrase gun ga yabe is kind of a double meaning, so if you don't want to be spoiled, please skip ahead for a while. The word yabai is used in so many different ways today that it is difficult to determine its exact meaning. The original meaning of yabai was danger is approaching or an unpleasant situation is expected. Over the past few decades, however, it has been used in many other negative ways. For example, in English, lame, worst, creepy, corrupt, etc. I feel that most negative words can be expressed by yabai. Moreover, in the last decade or so, yabai has come to be used also in a positive sense, as in cool or awesome. Of course, the yabai used here in the phrase gunga yabai cannot be interpreted in a positive sense. Even the word yabai has gotten many meanings now, since the original meaning of the word was danger is approaching, so I think the first thing people usually think when they hear the phrase is the military is in danger. In fact, as we will see in the next chapter, chapter 16, Kono Mustang takes Hugh's words "gunga yabe" in this sense. But if you continue reading Fullmetal Alchemist, you will find that Hughes actually meant the military itself is yabai. Maybe can be interpreted as bad or corrupt, rather than the military is in danger. I am very curious to know how the phrase "gunga yabe", which can mean kind of opposite things and is a bit misleading, is translated in other languages. So I would appreciate it if you could let me know. I want to talk about another thing from the scene where Hughes is on the phone. Someone who looks like Maria Ross approaches Hughes from behind. But Hughes immediately recognized that the person is not Maria Ross. Hughes points out that the real Maria Ross has a mole under her left eye. In Japan, moles under the eyes are sometimes called nakibokuro. If translated directly, it can mean weeping mole. The origin of the name is that the mole on the spots looks a bit like a tear. I cannot think of any other moles in Japan that have such a specific name. I think nakibokuro is special. Maybe that is why there are not many manga and anime characters with moles, but if they are, relatively many of them have nakibokuro. I wonder if there are moles with specific names in other languages. I'm a little curious. Those were my explanations for chapter 15. Then I will explain chapter 16. Chapter 16 shows the funeral for Hughes. I think it's probably European style, but Europe is a huge area and I'm not sure exactly what country the style is similar to. If any of you can tell me, I would love to know. The only thing I can tell is that it is definitely not the Japanese style. One of the big reasons I know it is not the Japanese style is because in Japan, cremation is the norm, so the coffin is not buried as it is. The graves are also very different from those in Japan. Although there are differences from region to region and some trends have changed a bit recently, the most common form of a Japanese grave is like this. Graves of this shape are lined up in rows. And unlike the mysterious graves shown in this chapter, Japanese graves are not individual graves but family graves. In relatively new graveyards, the graves are arranged in neat rows, but in older graveyards, the graves often are in disorder. Also, in such old graveyards, the graves are passed down from generation to generation, so each grave can be quite large, some as tall as an adult, and the place can look like a maze. This was the case on my father's side of the family. Like the Funo, I think the glyphs depicted in FULLMETAL ALCHEMIST are European in style, but if anyone can tell me exactly which country this is, please let me know. Perhaps the custom of funerals and graves has changed over time as it has in Japan. Considering the period setting of FULLMETAL ALCHEMIST, it's possible that Arakawa sensei may have adopted a more traditional style. After Hugh's funeral, Kono Mustang looked at Hugh's grave and said, 殉職で2階級特進、Hughes 殉職か. Basically, he is saying that Hughes got a second-class promotion and became a Junsho rank. I'm sorry, I'm not sure how to translate the rank of Junsho in English, so I would appreciate it if you could tell me how it is said in English. And aside from the way it is called, I can say that Hughes' former rank was one below Kono Mustang's, and a second-class promotion made his rank one above Mustang's. Anyway, the point is that the second-class promotion, Nikaikyu Tokushin in Japanese, was originally introduced in Japan by the former Japanese military as a system to honor soldiers who died in battle by promoting them 2 ranks higher instead of 1 at a time as they normally would have been. And in Japan today, there are still traces of the system. For example, in some professions where the rank system is clear and there is potential danger in their work, such as the police, it is sometimes used in the case of a person who dies in the line of duty. So for people who watch crime dramas like me, the word Nikaikyu Tokushin is immediately associated with death in the line of duty. I'm not sure if I could say that this is the case for most Japanese people. Moving on to next, there are a few things I want to bring up from Scott's scene. First of all, in what seems to be more of a dream than a memory, Scott says, Anija. As I mentioned in the previous video explaining burden free, Anija is a way of calling one's older brother, which is a bit old-fashioned, like something you might hear in a historical drama or something. It was used by the younger brother of the slicer to call his older brother. For more details, please check the link in the description below and watch the part where I talk about chapter 12 in the previous video. I haven't talked much about Scott's use of language, but he does use a little old-fashioned language sometimes. And his first person probably hadn't come up yet, but it's here, so I will talk about that as well. Scott's first person is ore. In sound alone, it is the same as the first person used by Ed, but the way it is written is different. Ed and a few other characters are written as ore in katakana, and the ore of most other characters who use the first person ore is written in kanji. These two notations are common for the first person ore. However, ore for Scott's first person is written like this using kanji and hiragana. I have hardly seen this way of writing ore anywhere else. This kanji reads onore and means oneself. This is just my own guess, but I think that when Arakawa sensei thought of Scott's first person, ore sounded right, but when writing it in katakana ore or the common kanji ore, something felt different, so it was written this way. The ore used by Scott is not often seen elsewhere, so it has a kind of special feeling, and onore One of the kanji readings is somewhat old world, so it seems to have solidity and heaviness. That's all for chapter 16. Here comes the last chapter of Volume 4, the bonus chapter. In this bonus chapter, Fury is looking for someone to take in a dog he found, and Habuk jokes, "I hear it tastes good when roasted." At the same time, he says, "In a country far to the east of here, they breed dogs for food." FULLMETAL Alchemist is a story about a fictional country, but just to let you know, there are countries in East Asia that do eat dogs. As far as I know, China and Korea are such countries. In Japan, there seems to be some traces of dog eating in ancient times, but in more modern times, it was mainly done under special circumstances, such as starvation or wartime. And I couldn't find the answer to whether it was a regular part of the food culture. In Japan today, it is unlikely that people eat dogs. That is all I have to say about this bonus chapter, but I also want to check the name of the dog. In the Japanese version, on the next page after the bonus chapter, there is an extra page where Hawkeye introduces their dog as Black Hayate-go. Black is the English word black. Hayate means a fast and violent wind. The word Hayate is sometimes used for a person's name, especially for a boy's name. Hayate in Black Hayate-go is written in katakana, but this kanji is often used when Hayate is used as a person's name. The name Hayate has an image of refreshing and agile from the meaning of the word, and I think it is a fresh and cool name. And the kanji go at the end is a postfix added after the animal's name to indicate that it is an animal's name. I don't think many people call their own pet dogs by adding go on a daily basis, but it seems that sometimes, like on official documents, the name of the pet animal is written with go. Also, police dogs, for example, are often called by their names with go. That's all for the bonus chapter. Those were the explanations of Volume 4, chapters 13 to 16, and the bonus chapter of the manga FULLMETAL Alchemist. Please feel free to comment on feedback and questions. This time, I talked a lot about Japanese culture. Since FULLMETAL Alchemist is mainly set in a European style, I expected that I would not have much to say about Japanese culture, so it was a bit unexpected, but I enjoyed it. Even though it is set in a country other than Japan, most manga are drawn by Japanese authors for Japanese readers, so I guess it is natural for Japanese culture to be reflected in the manga sometimes. I would be very happy if you could tell me in the comments about the situation in your countries for what I mentioned in this video. It is my pleasure to learn about various cultures, so I would greatly appreciate it if you could share things with me. Thank you for watching so far. I hope to see you in the next video. Bye!